Hello and welcome back, and in today's video I want to address a question I generally ask at least once a year here on YouTube. It's something that you guys ask a lot of the time when you're buying a solution for the very first time, and if you don't already know the question, then maybe look at the thumbnail again. That's crazy. Ultimately, is now the time to switch the media in your NAS or in your next NAS purchase from hard drives to SSD? Should you be making the switch? Because ultimately, the difference between hard drives and SSD, although they've been around for a very long time, one can argue that SSDs, with their much slower architecture, the platter-based design and the ARM reading that drive as much as it can, coming out via a SATA connection and generally giving around 160 to maybe 260 at the top end worth of performance, is just not good enough in this modern age. And a number of you want to make the switch to SSDs, which use less power, which don't have moving parts, which give you that speed of, around 400 to 500 odd megabytes per second per drive. But once you RAID them together, you get some great speeds. And ultimately, has the price and the facilities and the support of SSDs reached a point where making the change now from hard drives to SSD is appropriate? And in today's video, we're going to be looking at mainly 5 factors: price, storage, endurance, speed, and support. We're going to look at these 5 areas and gauge hard drives versus SSD use in pretty much all of the modern NAS platforms. We're looking at, everything from Synology and their embracing of NVMe SSDs to larger network interface ports in the likes of ASUS or QNAP, which have got 2.5, 5GB and 10GB by default. External connections and processors that can really take advantage of the bandwidth of SSD. So let's tackle that first one. The most obvious barrier, the most obvious hurdle, and the most obvious deciding factor between hard drives or SSD in a NAS: price. SSDs are still way more expensive than hard drives per terabyte. The minute you want to get a decent amount of storage space, you are going to be spending serious money. Now, time was SSDs were 10 times the cost compared to a hard drive per gigabyte. And the more you went into more enterprise level media, whether it was enterprise grade data storage, data center hard drives versus data center SSD, the price level still stayed at 10 to 1, 10 times per terabyte or per gigabyte, if you want to really narrow it down, on an SSD compared to that of a hard drive. However, in recent years, the margins has come together quite significantly. SSDs have arrived in a myriad of forms where the NAND, the chips that are inside, have varied in quality and density with things like single layer, multi-layer, triple layer, and stuff like that. All of them improving the amount of storage inside that we'll touch on in a bit, and managing to bring that price per gigabyte or terabyte down. The result is that now SSDs are about, on average, 4 times the price of a hard drive per terabyte, which isn't too shabby. Now, obviously, there are differences. The minute you go towards higher, faster end U2 and NVMe top-end SSDs, the minute you move towards more enterprise-grade hard drives in WD Gold and SAS and stuff like that, you end up with disparities, but generally 4 to 5 times the price of a hard drive per gigabyte, terabyte is what you're looking at. So it's a lot more money, it has to be said, but if you are going to get increased performance, if you are going to get more work done for your business, then that saving might actually be worth it. And if you're looking at NAS solutions that have 10 gigabit Ethernet, that have Xeon-based processors, that basically can take advantage of that tremendous IOPS speed, operations per second, and that great read and write speed, and really push it through to the end users, one or many, then it might be worth making the jump for you. So in terms of price, there's no avoiding that SSDs still cost significantly more than that of hard drives, but it's worth highlighting that if you are going to see results, as in you get more work done, you get more return of your money, it might be worth considering for you. Just make sure you're looking at Xeon-powered NASs and ones with 10 GBE at least, because that's the only way you're going to see that return. Now, in terms of storage, things have improved a lot with SSDs but they're still not up there with hard drives commercially. They're just not. Right now, traditional hard drives from companies like Seagate and WD for NAS systems currently are available at up to 18 terabytes of storage. Still looking at spending about close to £700 per drive, but you are looking at 18 terabytes thanks to heat-assisted magnetic recording. Now, those drives are reporting speeds of between 250 and 270 megabytes per second. So again, about half that of reported maximums of SSD. But these are hard drives that once you break them down to per terabyte, they still retail at about 30 to 50 quid per terabyte, generally, when you shop around. Now, SSDs, on the other hand, they are still, at least at the SATA connection, because the majority of NASs will utilize SATA only go up to commercially around 4 to 8 TB, with the 8 TB drives taking advantage of something called QLC, or quad layer cells for the NAND. The result is that those SSDs have more storage, but the speed drops a little bit, and the speed you'll be getting from them, although still much faster than hard drives, are still going to be less than that of those other less layered NAND, where they're kind of leveraging a lot of that storage potential versus the NAND. Now, it's still good and it's still faster, but generally right now, in terms of robust performance and a great middle ground, you can't really go higher than 4 TB on traditional SSDs commercially. If you go for the 8 TBs and the quad layer NAND, the controller can handle it and utilize those extra layers of NAND, but the performance dips. So right now, in terms of storage, it is 18 terabytes versus 4 terabytes. That's an enormous disparity. Now, in a NAS, as you see here, we have different numbers of NAS. We've got a couple of 6 bays over here, and we've got a couple of 4 bays over here. So once you enter multiple drives inside these systems, not only have you got the raw storage of the individual drive, but as you add 4 TB, 8 TB, 12 TB, 16 TB, you have more storage. But the minute you introduce a RAID level like RAID 5, you might lose one drive's worth of storage. So in a 4 bay, with SSDs, your maximum in realistic speeds these days is going to be 12 TBs of storage. Whereas the 6 bays over here with hard drives at 18 and even 20 TBs on the horizon, one single drive will still give you more storage than all of those SSDs. And the minute you RAID them together, you are looking at tremendous amount of storage potential. But it's worth highlighting that in those RAID arrays, the speed is going to improve as multiple drives are read and written to simultaneously, which we'll touch on in section 4. But right now, in terms of capacity, if that's your priority when buying a NAS, SSDs are just not there right now. And if that's the reason you're buying the NAS for the raw storage, don't go for SSDs yet. There are, of course, larger SSDs out there that take advantage of TLC 3D NAND. These are ones that are available that are for industry, for data center. These are SAS and NVMe U2 and U3 level drives. These are ones that require such data center class architecture that they are just not part of today's video discussion. I use the word commercially viably. These are not SSDs that you can purchase for next day delivery. These are SSDs that have got 15-day lead times because they get built at the factory, and right now they're just not part of this discussion. Ultimately, in terms of storage, stick with hard drives for now. Now, section 3, endurance. Now, there are many ways to measure endurance. I'm not going to bore you with mean time between failure, which I still maintain, although I do mention it in videos, I don't think is wholly convincing as an argument for SSDs. I argue that in terms of endurance between the SSDs and hard drives, in terms of rugged, constant read-write every single day, hard drives still have a higher endurance factor for me. They have probably the amount of data being read and written to them is larger, although arguably slower because of cylindrical platters versus the chips on an SSD, but the endurance of a hard drive's long term is just longer, I think, overall. And it isn't endurance, it comes down to 2 factors. Endurance is how long it maintains the performance, and how long it holds the data, how long can it be relied upon to hold the data. Now, in terms of hard drives, I am sure there's a number of you watching this video that have had a hard drive in your TiVo box, in your NAS, since 2010 or something, that has been chugging along nicely. I'm sure you're part of the contingent that thinks NAS hard drives are a big old con. But the hard drives have to be said that generally, in terms of endurance, in terms of general running, are better. Now, if I took a hard drive and dropped it on the table and dropped an SSD on the table, that's a different discussion. In terms of that endurance, that hard drive is almost certainly buggered. But the SSD should be fine. But we're not measuring it that. We're measuring it inside the box. Now, there are other factors, of course. A power surge. There is drives themselves being subjective to natural disasters and stuff like that. SSDs will have the advantage there. But in terms of general endurance, right now with SSDs, they have a couple of hurdles which they're just struggling to get over. Number one is durability in terms of write. When you're dealing with an SSD, the NAND has a half-life of the amount of data that can be written to it over time. Generally, if you look at the small print of any brand that does SSDs, we're talking Samsung, WD, Seagate, Kingston, any of them. If you look at any of these SSDs, you will see the warranty will generally be 5 years, and then in smaller writing, or X number of hours, because they know that although that drive is designed to have a workload of so many cycles and so many terabytes written per day and stuff like that, they know that that drive and its NAND has an endurance factor. It will alert you. It will even use certain performance measures to improve things, like over provisioning, where a certain amount of the SSD NAND inside is provisioned to assist the buffering with the controller. If anything, that lowers the endurance long term as well. So in terms of endurance, SSDs in a NAS, for me, aren't quite there yet. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the rule. There are NAS systems known as flash servers. Synology have their flash station, and QNAP have their own flash server series, and these are systems that are tiered and geared towards SSD utilization. They have lots and lots of SSD bays, be they SATA, U2, U3, SAS, whatever, and they have certain RAID configurations where there's staggered read-write across them, which go above and beyond traditional RAID and take advantage of timed RAID, where they select which drive getting the most write, and they purposefully pick the drive that's going to be that endurance-wise is going to fail the first, so that it will tell the tech guy this drive needs to be replaced soon. But bear in mind, once you replace this drive, you've got to start replacing all of them afterwards. So even though these systems are geared towards SSD use, even they can't avoid the eventual erosion of NAND is an SSD. And that's another reason why, in terms of endurance, I don't think we're there yet with SSDs in terms of overall endurance. And in NAS, I still recommend hard drives for that reason. Now, speed is an interesting one, because obviously SSDs are faster. On top of that, SSDs, much like hard drives, when you install them inside a NAS system with the right RAID configuration, each drive added presents a performance benefit to the overall system. Just because a drive reports at 500 megs and you use 2 of them, you don't get 1,000 megs. That's not how RAID works. What you get is a kind of percentage bonus of between 10 and 20% with SSDs. So if the first drive gave you ideally 500 megabytes per second, the second drive would up you to 650, 700. The next drive would get you between 8 and 900, and then eventually to 1,000 with those 4 drives of SSD there. Now, that's internal performance of read and write. Now, obviously, the files types you use, the number of bays on your NAS, the CPU that you utilize, and the network interface ports on the rear factor heavily into how much of that performance you receive. So it's very important to know that you might be putting SSDs inside a NAS and never getting that performance, because the outside performance is dictated by network ports there on the rear. Those ports generally will be at 1 GBE, 2.5 GBE, and then it factors all the way to the likes of 10 GBE, and larger network port cards are out there. With those larger network interfaces, you can get that speed from multiple SSDs in a RAID configuration. But if you don't have those larger network interfaces, hard drives still very much have a place in NAS. The reason being, one, that although this hard drive, and of course this is a demo drive, you wouldn't rip the front off a traditional hard drive. Normal hard drives will give you between 160 and 270 at the very top end. Some of the enterprise level drives at 7200 RPM. Each drive you add will give you somewhere between 70 to 150 megabytes per second bonus. So again, 200 becomes 350 or so, 350 becomes 500 or so, and so on and so forth. But you get that larger storage capacity, and it's going to cost you less to get that larger storage capacity and that speed. And that's money that you can put into a NAS that has improved network interface ports. Bear in mind also that you only need about 5, maybe 6 traditional hard drives to hit 800 to 1000 megabytes per second. And if you've got a CPU that's lower than a Xeon, you're not going to be able to get higher than that anyway. So chances are installing SSDs inside your NAS system, if you don't have the right internal and external architecture, it's wasted anyway. So in terms of speed, of course, SSDs are higher. But speed, although it isn't dictated by the hardware architecture and specifications of the NAS, I would argue that it plays as big a factor as the SSDs themselves in making sure that you get the throughput and speed that the SSDs promise in a NAS system. Finally, it's support and warranty. And in terms of support and warranty, it's more of a dead tie between these two media systems. There's lots of hard drives out there these days that arrive with between 3 and 5 years of warranty. The majority of SSDs, both in SATA and NVMe, arrive with 5 years of warranty by default. So both systems arrive with a large amount of in manufacturers' backing in terms of warranty going long term. On top of that, warranty replacements are a great deal, similar between the two of them, with generally 1 to 2 days shipping of a replacement of an erroneously recognized drive. Although it is arguable that some hard drives, when they are replaced, because they're 5-year warranty, you might get recertified repairs, whereas SSDs you very rarely get certified repairs. And what you get with SSDs is a brand new SSD, typically as long as it's within the warranty life cycle. And that's a very important point for a number of you out there. But bear in mind that a lot of SSDs that are used in NAS aren't made for NAS. They're made for desktop PCs, they're made for tablets and more. So if an SSD isn't designed for NAS, one of the biggest failings is within the warranty cover. A normal SSD that isn't designed for NAS use, if it's installed inside a NAS, it is going to be on for days, weeks, months, and sometimes years. And if the warranty behind that SSD has a caveat about the number of hours it's powered on for against the warranty length, that you might fall foul of that. If the SSD doesn't have a warranty based on NAS utilization and it's based on ad hoc PC utilization, do check out the warranty on a number of SSD vendors when you are looking at SSD drives that aren't designed for NAS systems, because you may notice the amount of hours the warranty covers for powered on is noticeably lower. The second thing, a lot of NAS systems to date factor NVMe SSDs, with Acer Store and Synology here having the NVMe SSD bays inside that allow you to attach SSDs and use that high speed, high IOPS, low latency to benefit a larger hard drive array and create a cached kind of hybrid storage area that allows you to improve the performance of a large array of hard drives by buying 1 or 2 SSDs, which is incredibly beneficial. But once again, the way you go forward with this, with Synology championing their own range of SSDs overall most of the time, and unless you're using an NVMe SSD designed for NAS, or at least designed with the warranty saying it's covered for that many powered hours, you might be setting yourself a trap there in terms of support and warranty down the line. And a number of NAS brands and their compatibility lists, as much as they try to monitor it, you have brands again like QNAP and Acer Store that have huge supported SSD ranges that a lot of the time an entire SSD range is bolted on to the support section just because they're ticking some average boxes, but a lot of them never see a NAS. Whereas on the other hand, you have Synology that is slowly whittling down their compatibility list to their own SSDs and top tier prime SSD types, and filtering out a lot of the ones underneath that they deem not as suitable for their system as others. So in terms of support and warranty, it's kind of up to you about putting SSDs inside your NAS. Right now, I believe in terms of price, we're at a good time for SSDs in NAS. In terms of storage, not really. In terms of endurance, we're getting there, but not quite there yet. And in terms of speed and performance, flat out tie. But warranty and support is down to you guys. But it's all about the SSDs you choose to buy. And there's loads of ways in which these days you can improve the performance of your NAS, from Thunderbolt to 10 GB adapters to increasing the memory on your system, because bear in mind, SSDs, they love memory if you're using them for caching. There are ways, of course, to use combo adapters like this one from QNAP, the QDA A28R. This allows you to install 2 SSDs in a single 3.5-inch bay, thereby turning technically a 4 bay into an 8 bay, resolving a lot of or improving performance and storage abilities. Then you've got network interface upgrades that you can add, like this one from QNAP, that allow you to improve the network interfaces on your PCs and therefore open up the bandwidth. And if you have multiple users connected by 10G, SSD really comes into its own. And of course, for the smaller upgrades, you've got ones like the QNAP's 5 GBE to USB 3 adapter for PC and NAS systems that allow you to improve network interfaces on systems like the 451D2 that are 1 GBE by default. And it allows you to upgrade to SSDs partially or fully and still get their benefits. But this is now the time to install SSDs in our NAS. I hope you found this video helpful. I know it overran a little bit and it's covered a lot of topics, but this is a subject I'm genuinely interested in year on year, because I think we're fast approaching that point when SSDs are going to have to, man up or go home. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Click like if you did and click subscribe to learn more. And I will see you next time.